So the session that you're joining now is a panel on regulatory updates featuring Ryan Kim, who's our VP of Professional Services from ProLink Solutions. And he's going to be acting as the moderator for the session with Rosie Hackett from Virginia Housing and Terry Bradley from OHCS, Oregon Housing. So now I'm going to go ahead and pass things off to Ryan. Ryan, I'll let you take over our screen here and take it away.
All right, I'll share my screen. Let me know if you can see it.
Yep, got it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bree, and good morning, everyone, or good afternoon if you're in the East Coast. I hope you enjoyed your first session with Jennifer Schwartz, which was very timely topic in the context of upcoming election. And thanks for joining this session. This session is called Regulatory Updates Special Session. My name is Ryan Kim, VP of Professional Services at ProLink Solutions. In this session, we'll be covering regulatory updates that's been keeping us all busy in our industry. This is a panel type session where I'll be moderating the panel, and we have two experts on this panel today. We'll go through this slide together and provide some color commentary as we go. Two experts. First, Rosie Hackett is with Virginia Housing. Rosie has held the role of Compliance Support Officer with Virginia Housing since 2023, ensuring high compliance standards for the properties in the Virginia Housing rental portfolio. She has over 20 years of experience in property leasing, management, and compliance monitoring of different affordable housing programs. So thank you, Rosie, for joining this panel. We're really happy to have you here today. Our next expert is Terry Bradley from Oregon Housing and Community Services, also known as OHCS. Terry joined OHCS in 2022 and has been promoted to Manager of Portfolio Support. Terry is a recognized national trainer of LIHTC, Home, HUD, and RD housing programs, possessing 30 plus years of experience in real estate. And in most recent 20 years, she has been focusing in affordable housing. So Terry, thanks for joining this panel as well. Really happy to have you both on this panel today. So again, this is a panel style discussions. We have one slide that we prepared together, and I'll be driving the panel, the slide deck, and we'll be having group discussions on each slide as we go. And this is the agenda. We'll be going over 3 regulatory topics back to back, and really try to compare notes between 2 agencies who are represented on this panel, and discuss any industry trends, best practices, any notable exceptions we have observed. So we'll spend at least first half of the session, like 30 minutes or so, on HABMA. HABMA is a hot topic for all agencies across the board right now. So we'll be taking a deeper dive into HABMA. And then we'll go over Inspire updates and spend some time on Inspire. And we'll end the session with AIT. And depending on how much time we have left at that point, we might just briefly touch up on AIT and end the session. So the first topic of the session today is HABMA. We're gonna start the presentation talking about the HUD type timeline of HABMA. So Rosie, can you provide an overview of a HABMA timeline set by HUD and maybe add a little insight into how Virginia Housing has adopted HABMA so far?
Yes. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me here today to share with you about how we're digesting HABMA in Virginia. So HABMA is the Housing Opportunity through Modernization Act of 2016, also known as we are all calling it HABMA. And it was enacted back in 2016 and effective for all HUD programs no later than 2025. So this screen here shows a high-level summary to the timeline of what we saw with HABMA. In mid-2023 is when the light bulb went off for most of us. that this HUD change will also impact the LIHTC program. LIHTC is primarily the program that Virginia Housing monitors, but this change also impacted our loan and bond programs too. In Virginia, we are following and applying the guidance with HOTMA and the programs that we monitor. We are also aligning the implementation dates shared by HUD. So we are strongly encouraging the implementation now in our portfolio, but we're not making it mandatory until the just recently released July 1st date. The purpose of this change with HOTMA for HUD was to simplify and standardize verification procedures across the HUD programs. And largely the changes with HOTMA works towards this goal, and in Virginia, we like it.
So Rosie, it sounds like Virginia Housing is strictly following a HUD timeline, which is the July 1st, 25 effective timing. How about you, Terry? What's going on in Oregon, and what's the status of adopting HOTMA?
Thank you, Ryan. And thank you, Rosie, for giving us a great overview of the that HOTMA timeline. I'm excited to be here with you as well, and also to give you some insight to hear what's happening at Oregon Housing, or also known as OHCS. Like Virginia, here in Oregon, a lot of our programs are heavy with the LIHTC program. And so we are going to be implementing HOTMA pretty much in its full entirety, with a few exceptions through the tax credit program. But also we have home, HTF, and several state funded programs that we decided to continue implementing the HUD or the HOTMA program as well, just to allow for a seamless approach, so that we're not using one plan or one approach with one program and the other, which is, as Rosie indicated earlier, that's kind of what HUD was hoping for, is that we would be in alignment with how we approach verifications, income eligibility, and things like that. With respect to, how are we going to approach implementation? You can see here on the screen, we've gone through a whole lot of years, starting clear back from 2016. Then in 2023, we really thought that, January 1, 24 was going to be the day for implementation. As we all know, January 1 came and went. And so what we've been doing here in Oregon Housing has really, diving into learning, attending trainings, understanding, how is this going to systematically change how we approach our programs overall. But unlike Virginia, what we plan on doing is issuing what we refer to as a technical advisory to our partners, is that we are going to begin implementation as of January 1 of 2025. I'll kind of talk here later as far as how we're going to approach the two deadlines, but we'll be, landing on that January 1st date.
We're moving on to the next slide, which is to discuss HOTMA readiness. So we, as a panel, as we are preparing for this presentation, we talked about what it means for agencies to be ready for HOTMA. We thought there are three aspects that we can discuss. The first one is compliance forms, and the second one is compliance manuals, and third one is compliance software. So starting with compliance forms, as Jennifer mentioned a little bit in her presentation, NCSHA has a published model compliance forms in August, and the list of all the forms are listed here on this slide. Starting with the tenant income certification form, also known as TIC form. So NCSHA has made some substantial updates on the asset section of TIC form to be able to support HOTMA. And we'll see an example of that TIC form on the next slide. But before we do a deeper dive into the TIC form, I wanted to spend some time on discussing different forms listed here. So I will just hand it off to Terry to kind of walk us through some of these forms.
Thank you, Ryan. At OHCS, we're excited to have the availability of these new model forms, designed towards best practices provided by NCSHA. When we look at, all of the changes that HOTMA is bringing about, we have determined that this is a really good way to do so, is to take advantage of them. As you'll note here, there is an asset self-certification and worksheet. What a lot of you may not recognize is that the asset self-certification is really what we used to refer to as the under 5,000 asset certification form. So that's being replaced with this new updated one that will allow us to align with what HOTMA has introduced, and coupled with that, to assist in knowing how to completely fill that out. And the new tick that was briefly represented is an asset certification worksheet that we can take advantage of as well. Below that, you'll see the certification of zero income. At Oregon Housing, we have a new name, but basically it's the same form, same questions being asked. We will be, updating to the format that's provided in the new updated form, but we refer to this as an income status certification. So for those of you that are going, whoa, what do we got? A new form? No, it's the same one. We just call it something different. Let's see, I think this form, just to kind of recap on that, the purpose behind it is so that we can capture, how is a household actually paying for those day-to-day living expenses when they claim they have no money or zero income, but there are certain types of income, so to speak, or benefits that a person may be receiving that we have to include. So this is one way of capturing that.
Right, thank you, Terry. Rosie, would you walk us through on some forms related to student status?
Yeah, so as we heard a little from Terry, we know that HOTMA requires a shift in the way we confirm eligibility. It's largely a good shift, but it's a change for all of the affordable housing programs. The changes with HOTMA require new forms, updates to manuals, and tenant selection plans. And training for the new standards. So Virginia Housing, we don't have the forms that are required, but we like and recommend the forms that have been made available through NCHSA. We do have guidance that is posted to our website, and we are relying on the implementation and other resources that are available by HUD. And we recently completed our transition of our tenant compliance for our partners to Procorum, which applies the HOTMA standards. We are all still learning and adjusting to the HOTMA changes in our industry. Terry, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Thanks. I'm sitting here looking at the list of forms provided, and I see one that's not provided by NCSHA. So last bullet, you'll note it's the income questionnaire. So at Oregon Housing or OHCS, we have required forms. So you noted, Rosie kind of alluded to that these are not required. At OHCS, we have several forms that you're seeing here on the screen is a required, the last one being the income certification questionnaire. And it's coming soon. It's hopefully going to be, made available in November, but it's really designed to include ways to capture all of the information that we need to be able to review and analyze that will hopefully stand up the new methods of verification that is brought to us through HOTMA.
Great. Regarding compliance manual, we got a little update from Rosie, but what about Oregon? Would you tell us a little bit about where you stand on updating your compliance manuals to reflect HOTMA?
Well, as you can see here on the screen, we kind of got ahead of the game earlier this year, and with our home and HTF compliance manual, we included HOTMA guidance so that we could begin introducing the way we approach how we determine income eligibility in our households accordingly. With the LIHTC program, we are anticipating that in November, we will proudly roll out a updated tax credit compliance manual that will include provisions on how to be in alignment with the new HOTMA guidance.
Great, thanks, Terry. The last topic is compliance software. So Rosie touched upon it a little bit, but if you are a ProLink HFA user right now, you are in good shape to receive tenant compliance data through Procorum that reflects HOTMA data points. So since beginning of this year, ProLink has made multiple releases as far as ProLink HFA and Procorum, to support any HAPMA changes, particularly updating Procorum's ability to receive NAMA XML version 8. As a side note, version 8 was published in August this year and incorporates all HAPMA changes. So most of the functionality that have been released should be available to you now. And we are making some final adjustment right now in Q4, which will be released in UAT in November and production in December. And after that, you are fully HAPMA ready as far as software. So just wanted to give you an update from ProLink point of view. So let's move on to next slide, which is the TIC form that's used by Oregon Housing. So Terry, can you give us a little update on your TIC form?
Thank you, Ryan. As you can see here on the slide, there's a few changes to what we are currently using. Again, Oregon does require a specific form to be used, which we make available to our partners on our website. One of the distinct changes to the form is going to be, I guess, what we're migrating to the new form from NCSHA with a little bit of a shift. We have included on page 1 the continuation of capturing the household demographic data on the form that is right now available through NCSHA. Those pieces or that information is not available. Our current TIC has it. We like it, so we're going to continue. So with only a few modifications, OHCS will be adopting the new TIC that has been rolled out by NCSHA.
All right, thank you, Terry. So we have a first poll question for the audience. So if you click on polls icon you see on the right side of your screen right now on the CBAN platform, you'll see the poll question popping up, and you can pick one of these 4 options. So we'll give you about 30 seconds to respond, and we'll see the poll results in real time. The poll question is, how closely are you adopting NCSHA model form for your new HAPMA TIC form? So the option 1 is exactly the same. You are just taking NCSHA form as is. The second one is very close. Third option is not really. And the fourth one is maybe not applicable to you, or you just don't know because you might not be in the compliance team of your agency. So I'll give you like 10 more seconds, and then Sam will close the poll and we can see the poll result. You 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sam, please go ahead and close the poll question. And I'll move to the next slide to see what kind of results we have. All right, so yeah, majority is very close, but there are 6 responses for adopting NCSHA form as is. So that's pretty interesting. All right, thank you for participating in our first poll question. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, we'll be discussing eligibility and income verification. So I'll be passing it on to Rosie to cover the eligibility issue, and then we'll be moving on to the income verification hierarchy after that.
Awesome. So with HAPMA, another shift is the definition of household occupancy versus family for eligibility. Foster children and adults do not count towards the family for eligibility purposes. They are now observed as you would a live-in aid, and would count for bedroom size, but not for eligibility. So as far as the hierarchy, the top verification source is EIB, but EIB is only available for certain HUD programs, and for the programs that we monitor, which is largely LIHTC, the EIB is not applicable for us. So largely we would be starting with number 2 with the work number. And there is differences with the work number. Some love it, some hate it. We like it, and we do know that there are some things that the work number may not encompass, but that's where we can fill in the gaps with, clarification documents, with hire dates or anything else that is needed to support that documentation. So with us and with all verifications, we encourage properties to continue to use best practice methods and verifying and documenting tenant eligibility. Terry, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Thank you, Rosie. I think that, again, I just want to remind one of the distinct differences, and this is, again, this difference is available to all of us. Every HFA has the ability to determine how are they going to capture the relative information. Are they going to be like Oregon and use required forms for most of that process? And along with, recommended forms to help ensure best practices are being followed so that we're able to capture it accordingly. When we look at the hierarchy here on the screen, again, as noted, EIV is not available for those of us that are monitoring tax credit or other programs. So that's specifically for HUD Section 8. So again, that will not be one of the hierarchies we'll be looking at. And also, I just want to comment on, as you kind of walk through, examples provided, work number, that would be like another form of verification we'll be looking at maybe a little closer here as we walk through the presentation. What I want to just note is that there's challenges here as you try to adopt these different hierarchies. For example, if you go to number 5 on the screen here, most of us are used to using the go-to method of written third-party verification. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to see that in the hierarchy of events, it's going to go down to like number 4 and number 3. So again, it's going to be a shift in how we work forward and try to, use best practices again, which is, I guess I just want to go back. When we look at the new forms being provided by NCSHA, leaning into those to help us capture that. And then also recognizing, as you're standing up your processes, how can you support this new method of verification? Again, I mentioned earlier, we got that one form that was at the bottom of the bullet, the income certification form, which is, or I should say a questionnaire, which is designed to help align with these different methods.
So the last thing to wrap up this slide, I'm going to touch a little bit about the major income changes that we've seen with HOTMA. So generally it breaks down to all income is included unless it's specifically excluded. So it kind of like, okay, we include it or we exclude it. So HUD did a really good job of providing guidance on what the exclusions are with income and assets. So the 2 examples that we put here on screen is the child support is now actual income received, and the workers' comp will always be excluded. Property should continue to include all income the household actually receives with respect to what is specifically said as excluded. Some other things to highlight with HOTMA would be how we handle self-employment, gig employment, et cetera, and the acceptable verification methods needed for those sources. So HUD has done a great job in providing resources on their website to help us navigate what these changes are and how they apply to the programs that we monitor.
Thanks for those updates, Rosie and Terry. The next slide, we are taking a deeper dive into eligibility. Rosie, can you take us through this list?
Yes, so on screen is a great visual breaking down whose income counts and whose doesn't, pointing out the caveat with full-time students. With inflation, that full-time student rate on what we count is going to change. So currently for this year and for 2025, it will still remain the 480, but is anticipated to change to that inflated rate in 2026. And at some point in 2025, that'll be announced.
Thank you, Rosie. The next slide is the income verification hierarchy. Terry, can you take us through this list?
This is actually a really good diagram of what's included in the notice, and it describes the hierarchy of methods of verification that the guidance is leaning into. You'll note that I have conveniently left off number 6 because the 6, which It's in reverse. So 6 is the highest level according to the notice, and that's leaning in towards more of the EIV reports that we're not able to use, we're not able to view. So I went right into number 5. This would be the work number report that we're somewhat familiar with viewing. This is the highest level. And as we walk through these methods, keep in mind what Rosie introduced earlier. I mean, HUD's, goal is hopefully to kind of ease or to align with how we approach this process, also to align all of our programs so we're all doing the same process, looking at the same reports. So we have number 5, that would be the work number, or let's say your software company has a similar report. Again, I would encourage you to double check with your HFA to make sure that you're in alignment with what their goals are or what their expectations are. The 4th one, the written third-party verification. This actually was introduced back in 2014 when HUD was trying to, really lean into their EIV process where it's upfront income verification from the tenant or the applicant. And the reason why they can look at it as third party, as you'll note here, is provided by a third party source. Examples include your pay stubs, your payroll summary, the benefit letters, things of that nature. Number 3, again, the old standby, what we're used to having our applicants and tenants fill out. For example, the employment verification, we got to, get it completed. We have to send it third party, to the employer, and hopefully we get it back with the right information. That's now not the preferred method. And then beneath that, we lean into the oral method and also the self-certification. All of these here are, again, a new way on how we approach. And as Rosie alluded to also earlier, when you look at some of the different sources of income, again, you'll want to see, okay, what's going to be acceptable to you to view and what can you rely upon and what best practices are you going to instill there at your agency?
Thank you, Terry. Yes, and Virginia is following the same guide. So we like the change. We think it'll make it a little easier for the properties to confirm eligibility, and for the individuals and families seeking to get housing, it'll make it a little bit easier for them to get into the door.
All right, thank you. The next slide, we are moving to discuss asset income, which was a big change in HOPMA. There are some new concepts here, such as non-necessary personal property. Terry, would you walk us through this slide?
Thank you, Ryan. I think Rosie probably will agree with me. This is a huge change. I mean, when we say the word asset in our old life, you use the term asset, and most people would like, what are you talking about? I don't have any assets. Well, HUD has done a really good job in breaking down them into 3 different categories, although we have to somewhat get used to what they mean when they say necessary personal property. Okay, what's necessary? How do you define non-necessary personal property or real property? So basically, we now got the 3 different categories. And once you understand, okay, exactly what does it mean when we say necessary or non-necessary, some of this make more sense. Let's go ahead and just kind of shift our attention to the table. Again, this table is a picture of exactly out of HUD notice, so you'll be able to view it also from your desk. If you go down under necessary personal property to the very bottom, so here we have equipment used for exercising. Kind of like to use this example because this is necessary. So I guess you wouldn't have to include it if you have I don't know, maybe a kayak, or maybe they'll say, no, Terry, the kayak actually follows under the non-necessary column where they talk about recreational watercrafts or boats like that. So again, it's done a good job at describing non-necessary and necessary. If it is non, we have to include it. And so you'll note as you go through the worksheet that Rosie's going to be introducing here shortly, that's important to understand and to define what is non-necessary and what is necessary. Also with HOPMA came a new, income limitation or property. I want to say here, I'm getting ahead of myself. Under 5,000 form now has gone up, as you can see, to 50,000. In 25, we're going to go upward a bit. But that's what's going to drive verifications and what we now know as imputed income. And again, as shown on the slide here, aligning with HOTMA, we're going to see a shift in our HUD passbook savings rate. We've got 0.40% now, and in 25, it's going to go up to 0.45%. Rosie, do you want to go ahead and maybe take us on to the next slide? I think it is.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Terry, for going over that. And yes, that list provided by HUD is very helpful as we shift our mindset into observing and applying on what assets count and what don't. So these two forms that you see on screen, before I get into the two forms, I wanted to share that we are very thankful for the collaborative NCHS minds that went behind creating these forms. I know for our state agency, when HOTMA came out, we were diving into action, trying to figure out, what tools and resources we would make available for our partners for this transition. So we were really thankful when these forms came out as an aid to be able to apply these changes. So the HOTMA rules do require a change in how assets are counted and displayed on the TIC. The new asset rules break down the assets into the three categories that Terry was explaining earlier. So we have the necessary, the non-necessary, and the real property. So after you determine what these assets are and where they fall, then we have to do a little bit of math. So these forms help us to navigate the steps that are needed and required with HOTMA and helps to determine what needs to be listed on the TIC. So the asset certification form that you see on the left is the new under 50,000 as adjusted form. And the asset certification worksheet is its right hand, which is also on the right. Both of these forms work in unison with one another, and one should not be seen without the other. The shift in how we look at and calculate assets has been the biggest challenge that we have seen, but so far it will be the greatest reward for the affordable housing programs.
All right, thank you, Rosie. Now we'll talk about software a little bit. I prepared 3 screenshots from Procorum's tenant portal to highlight some of the product changes we made this year to support HOTMA. So this page should be familiar to you. This is Procorum, and within Procorum, you have access to tenant portal right here. If you click on this button in the left navigation panel, you navigate to Procurum's tenant portal. And we're looking at one page within the tenant portal where it displays these 3 different tabs. We'll be going over this household income from asset page, but just to give you a context, a tenant event tab lists all your tenant events that have been uploaded through XML by your owner agents per this unit we're looking at. Household member tabs list all the household members within the unit. Household income tab lists all the household income. And there's the last tab is the household income from asset. On the bottom grid, we're looking at Sally Smith as an example, household. We have 3 assets listed here, savings, real estate, and retirement plan. And lucky for all of us, HOTMA excludes retirement plan from asset income calculation. So we can just focus on the first 2 assets, which are savings and real estate. As we discussed, savings is non-necessary personal property. And in this example is 51,000. And let's think of this as a 2024. So it does exceed the threshold 50,000. Therefore, we capture this savings account, this non-necessary personal property, as you're part of net family asset calculation. The second one is real property, which doesn't have 50,000 threshold. So even if it's below, it just doesn't apply. So 25,000 gets calculated as part of your net family assets. So that's together 51 and 25 gives you 76,000. And because it's above the 50,000 threshold, HOTMA captures both actual income from savings account, meaning your interest income from the bank, plus the imputed income. because in this example, this might be just piece of land that doesn't produce any actual income. So you use that HUD's passbook rate and apply that 0.4% to drive your imputed annual income. And because it's above 50,000 threshold, you count both actual income 100 and imputed income 100 to drive $200 as a household income from asset. Slightly different scenario on the next page is everything else is same except for savings account, and I put it under 50,000 threshold, 49,000. So in this case, because your non-necessary personal property didn't meet the threshold, your net family asset captures just real property. But one thing to note, although savings account, because it's below 50,000, is excluded from your net family asset calculation, but regardless of meeting the threshold or not, you will capture all actual income, which is $100 interest income from the bank is being captured here as part of your annual income from asset. But real property, which was imputed in the prior scenario, is not part of your annual income from asset because it didn't meet the 50,000 threshold. If you click on one of these assets, you navigate to a different page where it gives you a little bit of information about that asset you click. So in this case, this is a savings account, and you can see it is captured as non-necessary personal property. And one thing to note is this is not a system-driven logic by Procorum. We're just taking pure data from XML from your owner agent software. So that's probably one thing you like to watch out for. This is inputted and determined by owner agent, and that's just purely uploaded and displayed on Procorum for you. So this is our last slide for HAPMA section. So we'll talk about communication strategy here. So we'll divide and conquer this slide. So I will ask Rosie to cover the first 3 sections.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So as we wrap up about HAPMA, we wanted to finish with the needed communication that our partners need. So the first thing, number 1, is HAPMA is real, and it does impact all affordable housing programs, including LIHTC. And with any change, it requires an increased communication and a shift of how we do things. As mentioned earlier, changes with HAPMA require updates to tenant selection plans and leasing criterias. And additionally, who may have counted before for eligibility may not count anymore. And how we determine and what we count for income and assets are different. The HUD implementation guidance is the key to understanding and implementing the requirements with HAPMA. Terry, did you want to take over?
Thanks, Rosie. As we look down to training and guidance, I want to thank ProLink for allowing this platform to kind of highlight the key provisions as it relates to HAPMA, because it does give us some additional training and overview. But when we look to HAPMA guidance, or where can we go, you'll see going to the HUD website is actually a really good idea. They've got a lot of important, easy to follow, valuable training tools so that you might be able to navigate, the changes that HAPMA is providing. Also, I encourage you to partner up with your state housing finance agencies to find out what guidance they're providing, whether it would be on their website. I know Virginia's got a really nice little guidance on theirs. Also with the compliance manuals, technical advisories, look to see how they're rolling out the program, what they're providing internally for training and external for their partners. And again, as you've seen through that timeline, we have had an overwhelming opportunity to attend several industry trainings that are put on by professional trainers that, dive into the details of HAPMA. So again, I would encourage you to continue to participate in those as well. I think we can all agree that over the past 2 years, There's been a lot of shift in how we approach it from, as Rosie mentioned earlier, on our tenant selection plans, our leasing criterias, how we, make sure we're capturing the right households. Being apprised of all of the opportunities or the guidelines is going to be key to the success. And we're excited to, I guess, begin on this journey.
Yes, thank you, Terry. And just to double down on what you're saying about the HUD resources, the videos that they have, they're really good. So we've communicated this to our partners to go and watch those. We understand that some may not have the resources to be able to pay for training. So we do highlight and recommend the watch of those videos that are available out there and the reading of the guidance that is available. So in Virginia, each state is going to be different. But as far as Virginia, we encourage the implementation again now because it does make the process simpler, easier for everybody who's involved in housing and qualifying for the housing. So the HUD compliance date did shift to July 1st of 2025, and we are also adopting that here in Virginia. And the reason why we made that decision is because we wanted all of our partners to be successful with the implementation to HOTMA and allow them to have the time and training and software to catch up with the requirements. And then also we consider that some of our properties are layered with HUD programs. So we also wanted to give them the grace to be able to transition in unison.
I could not agree more with you, Rosie, on, approaching this rollout in a partnership approach. Here at Oregon, to begin the process, what we plan on doing will be rolling out all of these forms that we've been introducing to you today, making them available to our partners on our website. As we provide the updated forms and make them available, we're hoping that the partners will become used to them, start using them, because we are going to, I guess you could say, have HOTMA get implemented effectively on January 1 of 2025, which was the proposed implementation date. But we're going to do like a soft rollout. And so by that, I mean that from January 1 through the actual new date of July 1, we're going to begin monitoring our properties. And when appropriate, if we see a finding going through the process that's related to how we apply HOTMA, we're going to issue more or less like informative guidance, kind of a learning opportunity as we start navigating the new forms, the new processes, the new tools, with the goal that by the July 1 date, hopefully we'll be ready to kind of hit the ground running. Once that July date actually comes around, then the staff here at Oregon Housing will be making more of those findings as we're reviewing files and looking at the HOTMA approach that we're now trying to instill in our partners will be noted a little differently in our reports.
Right. Thank you, Rosie and Terry. So that's the end of our HOTMA section. So if you have any questions, please use Q&A to post any questions, and we can address those questions at the end of this session. And we'll move on to part 2 of our session, which is Inspire. We'll start the section with poll question number 2. So same drill, click on your polls icon and answer this question. Tell us your agency's Inspire implementation status, either fully implemented or partially implemented, meaning you are in the process of implementing right now, not implemented, or you might not be just sure because you're not in compliance team maybe. So we'll give you like 15 seconds to respond. We'll close the poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, Sam, please go ahead and close the poll question, and we'll see the results in the next slide. Kind of exciting, right?
Drum roll.
All right, so fully implemented is 29%, partially implemented 10%, not implemented 32%. So pretty equally distributed. All right. Well, thanks for participating. Now we'll move into our Inspire presentation, starting with adoption status. So we all are aware of HUD extension notice here that came out, which extended the implementation date from January next year to October 2025. But we like to note that this technically applies to your HCV housing voucher programs only. And as far as state HFAs that has a lot of different affordable housing programs, especially LIHTC, I get the impression that states are making their own individual decisions in terms of setting the appropriate timeline for their own states. Plus, we saw in the poll question, like equally distributed in terms of people who have fully implemented and who have not implemented yet. So I just wanted to ask you, Rosie, maybe tell us about your adoption status in Virginia.
So in Virginia, we implemented October 1st of 2023. So we've been at it a little over a year now. So 2023 brought a lot of changes for our industry with compliance with HOTMA, and also, with us digesting that, we also had to digest how we implement and do Inspire. So as we continue to unpack all of the things that came with Inspire, it was just another shift. So we've been talking a lot about shifting today. So this was another one that was required on how we conduct the inspections. But when we were looking at it, it's largely what we were already doing with our inspections. And it just boiled down some minor things on maybe what we called something before as a level 3 that, now maybe it's called, something else. One of the things also with Inspire, it required some additional tools that our inspectors may have needed to carry in their tool belts. And so some of those things are, on screen here. And they may need to be used in some of the inspections depending on what comes up, and some of them may not have to be used. But largely it's a shift on how we're looking at things. Terry, did you want to include anything about how you're doing things in your state?
Well, I can say that we did not begin on October 1 of 23. What we did, though, is we actually kind of dove into the particulars. How could we stand up Inspire going forward? And so we started taking the steps similar to what you've described with acquiring the new tools, the new software. We started out with a pen and pad, then we migrated to new iPhones for our staff so that they could actually take advantage of software. Also, when you look at some of those other items on there, the staff had to go through some extra training. How do you actually, now you have a tool you've never used before, how do you actually use the tool? For example, I see moisture meter here. Do you use it in every unit? And so there was a shift, on how we approached doing the actual inspection to take advantage of these new tools and new processes. And so the staff really focused on that. And then we did the full rollout, in April of 2024.
Thank you. So Inspire Hot Topics, we created a list of topics that we could discuss, starting with Inspire versus UPCS. Rosie, would you like to take us through some differences there?
Yes. So similar to HOTMA, HUD's vision was to align the programs to have one inspection standard to improve objectivity and accuracy to achieve a more reliable assessment of housing conditions for the persons who are actually living in the housing. So the new standards focus less on the appearance and more on the functionality, with an emphasis on areas that present the highest risk of harm for persons living at the properties. So largely in Virginia, like I was explaining before, it's the same inspection, but the shift boiled down to what resulted in an 8823 reporting to the IRS, and how long the property has to correct it. So the Inspire findings do result in an 8823 reporting. So Virginia Housing still cares about the other things. So we will note other deficiencies such as graffiti, cosmetic, or other areas of concern. But it may not necessarily result in the 8823, but it could be reportable to our tax allocation reporting department. And it still would be included in our report of findings when we finish up with our inspections.
Thank you, Rosie.
Harry, how about you?
You know, I agree with, this is a much better approach, using the Inspire standards. And like Virginia, we also will note those discovered during the Inspire inspection on our 8823s. We have not implemented back the state standards yet. Oregon Housing has state standards that we've always used in the past. But with the rollout of Inspire, I think there was a desire to really land in a positive way and really focus on those new approaches to how we do our inspections. But we will be also looking at our state standards because we do feel that those are just as relatively important to the health and, overall appearance of our properties. When it comes to, full implementation, we're excited that our reports are going to reflect not only the Inspire standards, but there will also be an opportunity to include the state standards as well.
Thank you. I hear scoring is a hot topic and there are many variations out there to score or not to score. What do you think, Terry?
I think with the score, when you look at scoring, I know, again, this is going to be up to the state. And a lot of states may be approaching, now with the new Inspire protocols, how do we identify is the state or is the property being successful in their rollout? We do not use the numerical scoring like, some others do, or what's identified when you're looking at Inspire, giving a score, a numerical score. In Oregon, what we've done is we updated our rating system. We publish those on the website and we land on a meet or a does not meet using 3 categories to achieve that.
What about you, Rosie?
So in Virginia, we do not utilize the scoring. We do observe that the deficiency protocol is now broken down into 3 categories: the severe, including life-threatening, moderate, and low, and then the correction periods range. So even though we don't utilize the scoring, we do recognize and implement the time to correct. So with severe and life-threatening, you have 24 hours. For moderate, 30 days, low 60. We did do a shift for our Virginia housing portfolio to where, we still observe the severe and life-threatening as 24 hours, but for all moderate, low, and state agency findings, those have all now been 30 days. So we have a 24-hour and a 30-day reporting time frame for us.
Harry, would you like to add anything on deficiency correction?
We at Oregon Housing, we are also recognizing severe, the 24-hour notices. With respect to 30-day, 60-day, we are in alignment as Virginia in, keeping with those timeframes. We have discussed, is there value or is there further discussion needed to go to allow for the full 60 days so that it's in alignment with Inspire, but currently we're still recognizing those at 24 hours, and then we have a 30-day correction period as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right, so we have Virginia housing example here. If you could walk us through, Rosie.
Yes. So since we don't score in Virginia, on screen is an example of what we created and currently use in Virginia for our physical inspections. We took all the requirements of Inspire and tried to consolidate them as a helpful tool for our inspectors to quickly identify the finding, check the severity, and move through the inspection without flipping through the large Inspire manual. There's only a little example that is on here to the left, but for each of the inspectable areas, the inside, outside, and unit, there is a similar form for each. And then we also created the notice for severe life-threatening findings to leave with the site the day of the inspection for them to take immediate action on these types of findings.
At Oregon Housing, we started out briefly as we were learning this process with the pad and pen, and we quickly shifted to adopting software. As you can see here from Inspect Check, we're looking at being a participant in the ProLink beta product that's coming forward. But as you can note here, this is this report here is very similar to what we were issuing to our partners earlier. So the shift or the visual look at it is pretty much the same, where it identifies the finding, it gives them, where it was located, what may or may not have to be corrected, a completion date anticipated. And then you'll note we also have the health and safety report that's provided to the property on the same day, but electronically, so that we're able to give them, immediate notice of those findings that were done. We're, like I said, you can look at the reports here, very similar to what our partners are used to getting. It's similar to what our staff's used to reviewing and going over, and we find it to be a very useful tool.
Right, thank you. As a side note, as Terry just mentioned, ProLink is releasing a beta product in Q1 next year to support your Inspire inspection. So please talk to ProLink folks if you are interested. So that's the end of Inspire. Now we're moving into AIT recap, and we have about 10 minutes left. So I feel like there's plenty of time to cover AIT. We'll start the section with poll question. The last poll question of this session. The same drill, click on your polls icon. Is your state using the new AIT compliance page in Procorum with your own agents to receive their annual income designation reporting? So either yes, no, or don't know what that page is. And I'm afraid that a lot of people might not know. So we prepare a little screenshot for you to show you what that page looks like. We'll give you like 10 seconds to respond. And this is obviously, we're talking about IRS requirement where owner agents need to annually report any sort of income designation changes throughout the compliance period. If you're in the AIT property, to state HFAs, and state HFAs need to make sure those changes are captured and the change reasons are valid. So that's what this page is built by ProLink to make those reporting process easy for our state customers. So we'll close the poll right now and take a look at the results.
I pasted them in, Ryan. They should show up.
Refresh, yeah. 8 minutes. Should we move on and come back to it, Sam?
But we had 8 responses that said yes, 3 responses that said no, and 31 responses that said they do not know what that page is.
What I was afraid of. So we use this session to educate some of the audience to tell you about the page that's available to you. But good to hear there are 8 folks out there who know about this page and maybe start using this page. So that's good to know. So the first slide on AIT, we have only like 3 slides on AIT. These are the questions we are asking HFAs to kind of think through as you are doing compliance on AIT properties. So I kind of walk you through these bullets and give Rosie and Terry to chime in as well at the end. So the first question is based on IRS guidance that was published in 22. Owner agents need to complete the unit designation before January 23 for all existing AIT properties that have come to existence since 2018. So that's one thing you have to consider. The second one is the owner documenting changes in unit designations as they occur? So there are several options for unit designation changes that are allowed by IRS, and owner agents need to strictly follow that guidance when they make those changes in the income designation. Third one is the owner calculating average of income for qualified group of units, which goes with the next bullet, is a property in compliance with minimum set aside. So basically the average of income for those units that are part of QGU needs to be at or below 60%. Otherwise, the property will be violating minimum set aside. Has the building's applicable fraction been calculated correctly? So as unit income designations get shifted around, you want to make sure you're recalculating applicable fraction at the building level. And the last one is, how is the owner reporting unit designation changes to the agency? So finally, what is your mechanism to receive these annual reporting on income designation change each year? Are you using an Excel template, or maybe you have started using the ProQuorum page that I was mentioning during poll questions? So those are a few things you like to consider as you are managing these AIT properties in your portfolio. Terry, what is your experience in Oregon as far as AIT properties?
Well, I'm pleased to say that in Oregon, we are taking advantage of the AIT compliance page that is made available through ProQuorum. We have found that to be a very useful and beneficial tool that is allowing our owners the ability to submit unit mapping description so that we can ensure that they are meeting the requirements of the minimum set aside and also on the applicable fraction. At move-in, we do require the property to create or to finish a template that gives us a picture of how they are at the beginning so that we can see that they again have complied with that requirement, because basically that's a good time to really understand what are the unit income levels that they've selected, and we can look at each bin accordingly to ensure that they are meeting the requirements. Annually, through the CCPC process, again, we're capturing information through the tenant event portal. We're getting that form, the compliance page included within ProQuorum. So again, also when we're going out doing our compliance reviews, we have an opportunity for them to look at the current status of the units and to ensure that they're remaining in compliance.
Thank you, Terry. How about you, Rosie? How are AIT properties in Virginia?
Okay, so similar to what Terry just shared on, we are also using the compliance ProQuorum page, which is very helpful. It eliminates the manual process. So we found that to be helpful in our portfolio, and our partners like it too. So if you don't know about it, I suggest that you go take a peek at that. So Virginia Housing collects the AIT information annually with the owner annual certification. So for the 2024 reporting year, the owner will certify and let us know about that, and that is due in early 2025. So the owner must designate the units before move-in and annually to identify and report the status of all qualified units to Virginia Housing as of the last day of the year. So even though we do require our partners to input their tenant data information as it occurs, the reporting on the AIT is done annually. We also require the owners to continue to keep the portal updated so that when we are coming out for monitoring visits, it's at any time during the year. So we have that information readily available and can quickly verify and identify if the property is compliant. Next slide.
So we'll be talking about owner-agent communication. I think AIT is a great tool for the industry because we are able to serve larger segment of the population, meaning those people income between 60 and 80% AMI. But it can be a little complex. It's more complex than other minimum set-aside options. And I think it is important to communicate well with the owner-agent community about AIT and how they can stay compliant with this minimum set-aside rule throughout the compliance period. So we have a few examples here from Virginia Housing. So Rosie, would you walk us through some of the things you guys have done in Virginia?
Yes, and agreed, just like we talked about, early in the slides with HOTMA, then Inspire. When AIT came out, it was the same thing. At first, it was scary. But as more tools and resources and guidance became available, that kind of lessens the scariness of it, and it made it more comfortable. So what we're seeing in our portfolio is that more of our partners are making this election. And since we identified that there is this pause and hesitation sometimes when it comes to this new tool that's available, we created these videos that is a helpful resource, and it gives a better understanding of how it all works, and guidance to how to make sure that if you do make this election, how it can work for your property, and how you can maintain compliance while utilizing this wonderful election. So this is a free resource that is available, and everyone is welcome to view it. So AIT has many, many great benefits for our partners, and it helps meet the housing needs for different income individuals and families in our states.
Thank you, Rosie. This is the last slide of today's session. Just tell you about the new page we've been talking about in Procorum that's available to you to help with the annual reporting that's required by IRS in terms of documenting any unit designation changes each year if you're in the managing AIT properties. So we released this page in at the end of 23 and beginning of 24. So this is when owner agents upload their XML file. And we're talking about XML, NAMA XML standard version 7, which incorporates all the AIT related data points. So we updated Procorum to be able to receive those new AIT data points in Procorum. So once XML is uploaded to Procorum, those data points are captured and displayed on this page. So you can see things like AIT unit designation column right here. So you can go all the way from 20% to 80% in market, defining whether each unit is part of qualified of group of units or not. And based on that, Procorum will give you a little guidance by doing little calculation to flag whether you're meeting the 60% average or lower requirement or exceeding. So this is obviously a red flag for owner agents who have just uploaded this XML file so they can see it, but also owner agents will be checking this page, and then you can revalidate by Procorum's way of providing a warning to owner agents as well as HFAs. So that is really the end of PowerPoint presentation we have prepared. So we have like 3 minutes left. I wanted to ask Bree or Sam to see if we have any questions from the audience.
Hi, Ryan. Yes, there is one question from Lisa Case with Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. Lisa asks, Rosie, how are you handling the various ticks needed for different implementation dates?
So it's the shift. So when we are starting our compliance review, we are asking the site, on if they've implemented HOTMA or if they have not, and just to kind of double down and be clear that either they have to implement all of HOTMA or they have not implemented HOTMA yet. So it can't be like, oh, we only like this part. We're only going to implement this. So, once we're going into those compliance reviews, having the understanding of, what we're looking at is helpful for when we are looking at those ticks. And so, and with the ticks, as long as they have, all of those required fields, then, and usually most of the ticks are pretty much the same. So we're not finding it challenging on site to saying, okay, everything is shifted. So it's usually you're seeing the flow of, who the household members are, what the income is, what the assets are, and what, what their set asides are.
Great.
Any other questions, Sam?
Not at this time. No, that looks like
Okay,
it.
perfect. Well, at this point, I will hand it off to Bree, but thanks for joining this session, everyone, and thank you for joining this panel, Rosie and Terry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, guys. Yes, thank you so much. Ryan, Rosie, Terry, we really appreciate it. It was a great panel. Thank you everyone for joining the session. I hope you found it valuable again in the information that was shared today. The next training will be checklists in ProLink HFA by Tom Dang with ProLink Solutions, and that session will begin at 1:45 Eastern. So we'll see you then. Thank you very much. Enjoy your